Welcome. It's your coach, Carla Nicole. Welcome to the Matters channel. So tonight I have a little treat for everybody. I wanted to do something different this evening. Um, if you can recall, not too long ago, I did a live regarding Tia Mowry and Corey Hardrict, and unfortunately their um, separation. And I talked about, if you can recall, I talked about how a lot of times in relationships we split because of our misunderstandings of each other. We just don't get it. And I felt as though, unfortunately, Tia was jumping the gun. And if you can recall, my angle on the video that I had, I talked about that I felt that Tia should not continue on with her playgirl years, but rather kind of pull back and get back to focusing on herself and maybe reconsidering, considering, trying to restore her self growth because it just appeared that she had a lot going on. And so I just wanted to recap real quick just about what I said at that time. Nothing major, nothing minor. But tonight, I have a whole nother treat. So I want to talk about the numbers and the numerology piece that a lot of times we miss in relationships. In the beginning stages of the relationships, we get so caught up in feelings and we want to have, you know, a long focus on how long we're going to be together, and we get along great, the intimacy's great. However, we never really take the time out to look at the numbers. How do we actually match up in relationships? Do we even know? A lot of times we just didn't have that. That wasn't something that we had to really use as a point of reference. And again, I think it's very important that when we desire to have a relationship, the way that we can start off with understanding each other is really important. But a lot of times we don't think about the unseen, what we don't know, things we haven't talked about, because we're so excited about being with, you know, our lover or the person we chose to be with. So tonight I want to introduce to you the master teacher, the wisdom coach also, Satori Seals. Please be sure to check out his channel. It's Satori Seals on YouTube also. So go over there and subscribe to his channel. He's got a lot of information to really help you to restore your innermost challenges that you have going on. But outside of that, he's brilliant. Books, all kinds of things. So please check him out. Again, make sure to subscribe to this channel, Coaching Matters, and make sure to please share this video because it's going to be a lot of information given tonight about the Tia and Corey Hardrict split in the union and why it didn't last. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that attracted them to begin with? So welcome, Satori. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the channel.
Yes.
So you actually got to see some of the things I talked about with Corey and Tia.
Yeah, I did. I saw some episodes you did. Yeah.
Okay, so I know it's not always, I'm kind of girly, so I like to talk. But what are some of the things that you really um, pulled from the most regarding the actual separation of the two? What do you think are one of the major things that you saw being their challenge?
One is their communication.
Mm.
There's a communication, and I guess we get later to show why I'm saying communication, but I could just
Right.
look at it just based off the numbers. And then also, like you mentioned, there's obvious immaturity. So when we look at Corey, you look at Tia, just at eyesight,
Yes.
aside from all bias, all persuasion, because everybody's going to try to take role and position.
Right.
But if you just look at them unbiasedly, you obviously can tell there's an immaturity versus maturity ratio going on.
Right.
And so obviously that contributes to a potential clash, or it's already happened, right?
Right.
So communication, immaturity, and then you were just saying off the rip. So you,
Yeah, just off the, I'm just
off the
asking,
rip.
just off
Yeah,
the
so
rip,
not even
yeah.
to numbers, but off the rip, you can, communication.
Mm-hmm.
When I first looked at it, I was like, yeah, communication, and there's an imbalance between maturity versus immaturity. And so those are the things that definitely jumped out. I mean, there's other different things, but most of it, if we look at it, is all going to trace back to those two basic things. Yeah.
So again, we're talking briefly. Anyone that just joined, welcome. This is Coaching Matters. I have the Wisdom Coach, Satori Seals, Master Teacher, and everything else. He's got a lot of titles, but anyway, we're talking about Corey Hardrict, Tia Mowry, and why did they split? What happened? We just want to kind of get into from the numerology view. What happened? Why did they part ways? What were some of the significant things that happened in their union? And one of the things that we're just talking off just looking at it from a landscape view. We're not talking about numerology. We're just speaking on the landscape view. You mentioned maturity being an issue and communication. So those are two majors in a lot of relationships. So they're not in the minority. So let's not make this about them being celebrities per se. They're also just commoners. Yeah. We as regular people, we have a challenge usually in our own homes and relationships. Our main problems usually stem from communication and the maturity level. So let's talk about briefly, you mentioned about the numerology view. So talk to us a little bit about why are numbers so important in relationships? What do we get from knowing the understanding of our date of birth and all of that? What does that do for us to understanding who we are first of all, and then what does it do for our relationships?
Well, try to imagine your life without numbers.
Are you being funny or serious?
I mean, just saying. So numbers is all intertwined.
Yes.
In everything that we're really
starting
doing.
from our birth date. I mean, it's the first date that we learn, right?
So when we come out, to make it simple, when we're born and stuff like that, obviously we're born on a certain date, and so that date has a connection, has an astrological connection.
Okay.
And then also because we're all our souls, so we also has a shaping of who we are as a soul,
right,
on the life path that we're charting.
Okay.
And so there's a moon, or like a lunar influence, which is the emotional part. There's a solar influence, and these are forces.
So the forces are from the planetary.
Yeah. So when we're born, so we have this whole connection, and it's affecting the whole world and civilization that we live in.
Okay.
And so we're born and we have an alignment with it. So the numbers help us identify what is our alignment. So what's my alignment with the moon? What number does that show up as?
Okay.
What's my alignment with the sun? What does my number show up as? And what's my alignment with the earth? What is that alignment? And then also me as an individual, as a soul, what is that lineup? And so we basically have four primary dominant numbers that kind of really charts and begins to establish the traceability of who we are, our motivations, our attractions, our repulsions, our tendencies, our challenges, and everything and so forth as an individual. Okay. And then as on top of, we can see and trace and see, we can forecast based off of the energy projection, based off of the numbers, based off of the alignments, and then we can see how we interact with that. Okay. So there's a lot that kind of goes on. Right. There's like this big old energetic force gumbo that's going on, but to make it real simple, we can kind of start to trace it, because at the end of the day, everything in life is a result of the projection of the soul, or as a result of the forces emanating certain things into the universe, into life. as we are. And so when we begin to start understand what this is, we become like a floating leaf just flowing with the wind, and being able to we're able to chart our trail in life more fluidly, even through troubles. Because we can navigate even better when we start knowing the hardships. I always say the greatest, um, you have an effective tool when it helps you navigate through hard times. It has a troubleshooting benefit with it. So
Okay.
the numbers kind of helps with that. So you can troubleshoot through relationships, troubleshoot how we're responding to things.
Okay.
It allows us to be able to understand the interaction, and we could be a little more productive or a little more mindful,
Right.
which allows us to be able to kind of curb what's happening at that moment. So.
And it can also reduce some of the conflicts, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Conflicts.
yeah.
And
You can steer it. You kind of can re-steer it.
Okay.
No one's exempt from conflicts, but you can probably get to a conflict resolution a lot quicker, or you
Right.
can mitigate it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so forth. So that does.
And it also
come play.
it helps us as coaches to be able to help the
Oh yeah, to advise and
yes,
yeah,
to kind
absolutely.
of help them to navigate when they're creating their relationship changes, because you have to evolve and make changes, and actually a lot of times we don't realize that we're constantly changing. However, when we sit down and look at the numbers here, we're understanding that the evolutions has to happen, correct?
When you say evolution, I mean the we're all active. So when we talk about the soul, um, everybody pretty much unanimously be like, oh, it's the mind, will, and emotions, and that's correct. But to even go a little bit deeper, um, there's a very interesting, striking definition of the soul, which means animated principle. And so that means there's principles active inside of us. And so it's measuring how we coincide with it, how we correspond with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so based off of that, because when we say evolution, we just think it's always going to growth. But sometimes we are moving in a degenerate state. No, we're going opposite of evolution as well too, if we're not cultivating and refining in what we harvest. So a lot of times, so I just wanted to bring that distinction, because even though yes, things are changing, but it doesn't mean that don't mean you're evolving.
Doesn't mean for the better.
For the better.
Okay.
Right.
You're changing, but
yeah,
it doesn't.
You're changing, but you're growing in a stagnated state.
Okay. Right. So
right.
You're still changing, but
you're
it's
still
just
changing. Yeah, yeah. So that's what happens in relationships.
It's a regression versus a progression.
Yes, right. And so that's what happens. So a lot of times we say, "Oh, everybody's always changing," but it's like, but what direction
are we going here?
Are you really going? And then together, what is that creating? Okay. And so that's why I was mentioning about that maturity piece.
That's important.
In the immaturity piece, because if you got someone that's immature, someone that's mature, right off the rip, I'm already like, oh, there's a progression, a regression.
Yeah.
That's highly more active, because you have an immaturity,
right,
and a maturity,
right,
coming together. So
and the what I defined that as in the prior video, I created a distinction for men to understand and for women to also educate themselves. I developed a defined understanding called daughter wives. So to understand that some women or wives don't have a high maturity. And so the man or the husband in the relationship becomes more of a father role versus a partner or husband role. And so that's why when you're defining that and explaining that, that's what on previous videos that I've talked about this, I actually spoke about that regarding those type of women as daughter wives.
Yeah, because it creates a strain, whether it's the woman or the man.
Absolutely.
So when you have that mix, and unfortunately, it happens more than we even speak about it, because I think a lot of people don't talk too much about that because we feel like we're pointing the finger. But in this case, we talk about Tia and Tori, since she's always showcasing herself.
Right.
We all can look and be like, there's a lot of immaturity there. And we start seeing Corey starting to kind of speak, you can see a lot of maturity. Mm-hmm. And so that, like you said, I like the whole teaching on the daughter wives,
Yeah.
we definitely can tag that into their situation because just simple fact of what she represents and what she's been exuding, you know. And I'm trying to be. It's just what she's showing, so it's almost like you're better off not saying nothing because because we're watching you. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're in your mid 40s and you're not coming across as a mature woman. Your rationale, your decision making, like all the things you brought out in your shows, is like it's obvious that when you make decisions, you don't incorporate, you know, the effects, obviously, the impacts, what it creates. You know, you're just impulsive right here in the moment, or you're being selective to what you're trying to be, and you're just caught up in a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't really matter.
Right.
And that I think everyone, whether you're a fan of Tia or not, you know, we could look at it and just be like,
oh,
you just, you know,
and
where's
like
your base?
and to her credit, I like to also say, because I have said in my videos prior to this, is that unfortunately a lot of women that married young, okay, they normally, you know, jump into this mature relationship, which is marriage, and they do so without really having understanding about themselves or understanding about their sexual truths. They don't know much about their mothering. They don't know much about how to be a wife. There's a lot of things that is insufficient because most of the women, and you know, I talked about this, most women jump into marriage with the hopes of a romanticized version of what they're going to get. And a lot of times they find out, ooh, marriage is more monotonous than it is
Right.
full of adventure. Now you mentioned that there's different types of scenarios where we can have in relationships to numbers. We can definitely find out some very vital things in the numbers. What do you seem to find the most interesting when we're looking at numbers for a lot of clients?
You talking about clients?
Yes.
You talking about what terms with the numbers are showing?
Yes. What are the numbers showing usually? Just in your experience with seeing on your end, what are you seeing with the client numbers? What are you seeing as far as communication and the like we were talking earlier, they kind of struggle with communication. What are you seeing also within your clientele? Are you seeing a lot of challenges with communication, with actually applying the numbers?
I mean, it just depends because it depends on everybody's lineup. There's I could say basically in terms of relationships, you can. One thing that I definitely know, a lot of times relationships that seem like they're not clicking or they're going awry.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that there's the gravity score is not really in their favor.
Okay, and
So
before you go into that, explain to them what is a gravity score, since we're talking about that real quick.
Yeah. So the relationship gravity score kind of just captures and gives us insight into the push and pull inside the relationship. So there's three basic things you can catch it: the push, the pull, and the resilience.
Okay.
And so, excuse me,
So if you're in a relationship and you're pushing, that's doing what?
it's pushing the person away.
Okay.
And if you
Pulling.
got to pull, and it's based off the energy that y'all share.
Mm-hmm.
If you're pulling, then you're pulling them close to you. So ideally in a relationship, you want to have a high
Pull, of course,
pull,
right?
Right? You want more pull
Then
than push.
Gotcha.
But if you got more push
Yeah.
than pull, then there's red flags and all kinds of stuff showing inside the relationship.
Okay.
And then we look at the difference of that push and pull,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives us insight into the resilience factor. And the resilience factor translates over into how to deal with conflicts, how to deal with challenges, and how the longevity, you know, if you're talking, you know, longevity, or to be able to endure without it shifting the whole makeup of who you are. So if a problem comes up,
Right.
do all y'all melt and y'all at each other's throat, or
Right.
y'all just respond to it in a very collaborative way and just kind of able to smooth it out when the ripples come.
Right.
And so the relationship gravity score kind of captures all that and gives us a lot of insight because it has all the different forces and factors that we talked about earlier.
Right.
When we're born, that's all incorporated into it. But we begin to figure it out from a numerology point of view
Okay.
and show the math behind the relationship. So it kind of gives us a good indicator of the state of the relationship,
Okay.
possibly where that relationship can go if there's certain things not addressed, and we're just like, these are the natural blueprints
Mm-hmm.
in the combination when we come together relationship, and it begins to highlight what that energy that y'all create and that y'all operating up under, and like what direction will it take you.
Okay.
So so in all that I just said, basically it just comes down to the choosing. So a lot of times, you like you said, you saw
Well, I said earlier, like we're usually pretty young when we're choosing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay. So you're choosing, and you kind of all of a sudden when you start to come into your own and start coming to some self-awareness, hopefully,
yes,
you start to realize like, oh, this person that I chose right here is not really congruent into where I'm evolving into, or and so forth. We know that happens a lot. I mean, communications all across the board. Relationships are, but it just when you sit down with individuals with the numbers, it really invites people into a reflection. And so the other thing that I recognize a lot of times is people are not really realizing different. It kind of helps people to recognize different aspects of their partner or partners that they have. So I see that's really the biggest thing is like, oh, because sometimes we put someone in a certain framework, like we have our own thinking matrix.
Yeah, we do.
I know one time we did like a coaching thing with someone, and remember I was in that whole session like, well, this person thinks like this, and this is how they operate, and you're trying to keep them confined into this, and then the other person was confirming.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly how I think.
Yes.
That's exactly how it is. So a lot of times, we just can't see past our own lens. We can't see past our own interests. We can't see past our own bias and our own preference. And so when that happens, if you operate inside a relationship, if that's not directly coinciding, it's going to build some tension. It's going to build a lot of collision.
Right.
And so what I recognize, a lot of people don't understand where the collision is coming from. And so from the Live Soul numerology, it helps people to uncover that without people feeling like the blame. It kind of helps them to, look, we got to worry about the blame. Let's get understanding, because one, what's the energetic exchange and the result from that?
Right.
Two, what's my thinking? What angle am I coming from? And then what am I really seeking? What makes me feel balanced?
Right.
I might come from a whole different, we call it soul archetypes versus you, right? But we know we all have a sense of balance. But what is that? Is my sense of balance and where I'm moving to balance, does it conflict with your sense of balance? Right? And so that's important. Or then the emotional state, right? So that emotional exchange, is our emotional exchange in a high productive state? Is it a harmonious state? Or is it amplified in terms of it's beneficial for us? Or is it amplified where it shifts us into our shadows? Right? Does it take us to an imbalance? Does it take us to our polarities or extremes of things opposite? And so, and then also the ego part, right? So are we clashing our ego, or does our ego soothe each other? Does it comfort each other, or is it? And so when you see all of that, I think the biggest thing is just giving people additional understanding or confirmation. It gives them understanding or confirmation.
Well, now when we look at Corey and Tia, don't want to get too off track, but if we look at Tia and Corey, when we take a look at their numbers, as you were talking about, so invite us into the world of the living soul numerology. Let me understand, or help us to understand, if Tia and Corey first came into our office and said, hey, we're in love, we want to get married, we're going to go from the beginning, we want to get married, and we're really excited, and we're like eager to learn what we can do to kind of, safeguard our marriage. How can we safeguard it? Without feeling like we're being too hard on each other. We just kind of want to get an idea. And let me just be honest, a lot of times as coaches, when we get newlyweds that come in, they're very green and excited. So we're going to assume that if this is the case, this is the scenario, we're going to bring Corey and Tia into our office and we're going to talk to them on a very, very simple level. What is it that you two are wanting to do? You're wanting to get married and engage and get excited about, oh my God, I'm so in love with each other. Let's talk to them about what do we see in the numbers. So welcome, Tia and Corey. We're glad you're here. So we're so happy you're here. So please enlighten us, Satori. What are we seeing in their numbers without getting to be too discouraging? No. Let's be on, but let's be real.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. So right off the, we're talking about the relationship gravity score.
Yes.
So with Tia and Corey together, their score comes out. So they have a 46% pull.
Remember, we talked about the pull earlier. So the pull is the pulling towards each other.
Yeah.
So Satori's inviting us into the living soul world. And in this world here, according to their numbers by their birth date, Tia's birth date and Corey's birth date, their pull is at 46%.
And then their push is 54%.
Push means to push away.
So in this case, the push is a lot more stronger than the pull. And so then we look at so that gives you what, a -8.
Yeah, -8 it would be
a difference between
the two. Yeah.
So this makes their relationship, based off the energetics, it makes it very cautionary. Because of the push is stronger than the pull. So when situation stuff arises, for example, where are you going to pull from reserve to overcome that, to keep everything in a certain flow? So
now they're excited. They're wanting to get married.
Right.
So with this excitement and really eager to do this, how do we explain to them their challenges?
Well, this is where, on the time we're here, but this we start getting more into their numbers. Like for example, Tia's numbers is 7672 and Corey's number is 2981. So I'll begin to kind of go into, and we can kind of directly and begin to pinpoint where the particular challenges might show up at.
Good. Okay.
Right. And they're clashing.
Right.
Or and also show where there's strong attractors. Obviously, it's like there's an attraction there.
Right.
Right. So sometimes a lot of us, we have attraction, but we have all these other different things we pepper in there, and it shifts us from what is our strong point.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like Tia and Corey, they have a strong attraction around, like I said, like that number 2.
Okay, so let's talk about the 2. So what does the 2 signify in the living soul?
Yeah, the 2 signify in the living soul numerology system. That's the aspect. It's feminine dominant energy position. It's very it's make like a matriarch, right? Want to hug and keep the family things and go. So it has a level of tradition. It favors traditional things, not to be so rigid, but very traditional to keep everything thriving and productive. So the sense of like family orientation is highly favorable up under the 2, and how the 2 will go about it is try to build routines, right? Establish traditions, benchmarks.
Okay.
And it wants a level of predictability. So not just in the framework, but also with each other.
Okay.
They're looking for that. But then also it wants, when it's in a healthy state, it wants to be, it also operates from a state of patience.
Oh.
It's a very patient archetype and energy that emanates. So there should be a patience.
Okay.
Also,
on both ends, or you're just saying?
Yeah,
Okay,
in the exchange. In the exchange. So this is their main attractor.
Okay, this is the attractor inside their exchange. Okay.
So probably on the attractor, there's probably a level of patience they have with each other, despite, because you look at the numbers,
Right.
we got more push than pull,
right?
but yet they still find this chemistry to just really to be enveloped in each other.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's probably a level of patience, right? And they also have this aspect of just this level of established tradition, this family orientation,
which is also something that can kind of help to
that's
bring the balance.
That's their attractive point.
Okay.
You know, so like, okay, what's that point of attraction, that strong point right there?
Right.
And they share that in there. Okay. So that's one of the suits, and it's also very efficient. So it doesn't want to exhaust its energy. Now, that's just off the raw form. Then when you start looking at that too, we start looking at what could be conflicting with the two and their individual lineup, their makeup, or with that. And so when we begin to look at it,
right,
like Corey's, his 8 with a 2, and Tia inside herself, she has a lot of conflicts going on with her too. So her 2 is not fully in that mature state,
or in the tradition as
exactly.
As what we're
so it pulls her into the shadow of the 2.
Okay.
So even though they had a strong connection with the 2, but she also disrupt the 2.
I was going to say, if you get waverly,
yes,
you start to get out of balance,
yes.
And again, ladies, a lot of times we miss the fact that sometimes we have hormonal changes after childbirth. There's things that change inside the body hormonally. So if we're comfortable and have comforts in tradition, after childbearing, we may start to be more in a turmoil internally, that we're starting to face our mortality. And so now a lot of the things we're comfortable with in tradition, we may want to start to spark some adventure.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So her conflict, I'm glad you mentioned the adventure piece, because the 2, even though that's a strong suit,
yes,
but inside Tia is liable to compromise the strength of it, because she has a imbalance. It creates an imbalance with her 7. Where her 7 overrides the 2. And so that 7 is that sense of adventure. So I think there's a part in Tia that kicked in because she does have this pull that brings them into the shadow.
Yes.
And so her desire for adventure began to take on the non-productive factor. It began to compromise the familial commitment, the familiar focus.
Yes.
And she began to, like we say, break rank or break code.
Right.
But the 2 wants to stay in code, in a healthy state. But because she has inside herself this high chance of creating imbalance with that 2,
yes,
even though they have the attraction from that 2,
yes,
she has this other pull that's going on. Now, and this is where it comes. If you're not self-aware, that you might have these waves and bouts of this, I call it adventure tick. When you think about Will Smith, Will Smith has an adventure tick. When you think about Dennis Rodman, some of y'all play basketball or whatever, old school, so I won't go there, but everybody knows Will Smith. And you see Will Smith highlight videos when to go on these crazy voyages and stuff like that. I just want to go skydiving. He has this adventure tick about him.
And Tia has the same.
And so a lot of times, and because it's a masculine dominant driven aspect, so it is willing to go ahead and go and not think about anyone else. It can get, and it's a dominant, so it's already pursuing, it's already trying to go forward, and it's dead set on, I just need this adventure tick. So which
I think is also one of the things I talked about in the last video, is that a lot of times when you are in that realm of desiring to just jump ship and go into adventure, 9 times out of 10 that comes from that desire of, it's almost like it's like tapping you on the shoulder, and it's like luring
It's an
you
itch.
in.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
and
like
you
it's an
just
itch.
can't you
Yeah.
just can't run from it.
Yeah, so you have so it's like how does it apply? And so unfortunately, she has a 2 and a 7, and so it's this conflict. One part is like I want to be very traditional. I want to do the right thing, stay inside the rules.
Right.
Then the other part is like I just want to just go out and just burst and have all this fun. And we see that in
Well,
what
yeah,
she's
of course.
showing,
Yeah, yeah.
when she's showing. So it's I can see the numbers just playing out
Yes.
with her. So with the 2, and not to point fingers at her, but that's going on inside her soul profile, just right there on the surface. And then so and even with Corey inside with himself,
Okay.
then he has some issues going on with his 2.
Which what we say
So
is his
you
issue.
begin to see he has opposition. So in other words, he can kick in extremes. And so his 8, which is the communicative aspect,
Right.
and remember I said his issue with communication.
Communication, yes.
So Corey, his 8 has some things going on with his 2. And his 2 is placed up under his moon, his emotions.
Okay.
So Corey doesn't really express his emotions that much.
Okay.
Tia's her her 7 is under her emotion.
Wow.
Okay. She has 2 7s. She has a 7 under emotion.
Okay.
She has a 7 under her earth, her sense of balance. So all this adventure, and then but her 2 is her consciousness, her psychic force.
Right.
And so it pulls her decision making, everything. It begins to cloud the emotion part.
Yes.
And so they both have this pull as the individuals themselves.
Yes.
That's pulling at their emotional state, and it's pulling the emotional state to shift it more into its shadows.
And I wonder personally, now this is just something I'm spiritually thinking, is I wonder if perhaps maybe some of her adventure got really, I think, challenged by her 7.
What do you mean?
Well, you know how you were mentioning how her 7 goes into conflicts with her 2.
Right.
So do you think that maybe it's one of her, maybe due to maternal changes, or when she became a mom, maybe she got more, it caused more of a conflict there with her numbers?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's certain environmental factors and social stuff
That could
just
have.
externally that goes on. And now her 7, she has 2 7s in her, so that's amplified. So that thing is very strong. So if you feel like you have this adventure tick and you feel like it's not being fed,
Okay. Yep.
right? Then it creates a voiding, whether it's justified or not. And so you're going to seek out to what? Try to fill that void. You need a sense of adventure. It's like, oh, this is, the monotony is going on. I just, let's spice it up or something like that. Where,
but do you think that in the beginning of a marriage, before that was even exposed to herself, she could have even known, per se, that this was going to take this U-turn in the marriage?
It just just depends on people's awareness. That's where the whole self-awareness piece kicks in. First of all, like I just released a book called Phases of Femininity, and that's one of the things I was bringing out in there is like we're
going
going
to put the link in here in the comments too.
we're so we're going through different phases. So depending on what age you're at, there's certain things that's being initiated, activated, or deactivated.
As you evolve.
As you evolve. So as you're progressing through life. So just think about we just seen a season change, right? We went into fall, was gradual, right? It wasn't no big announcement like, hey, we're going to fall. We just start to see those effects
change,
right?
Colors,
it's the same thing with us as we're moving through our cycles, and then now we're moving into the winter. Like unfortunately, I came here in Ohio and we saw a snow flurry going on. So it's like, oh well, you only had your fall fun. We about to be in winter,
right? And
so that's the same thing going on with us. Is that we're on this energetic rhythm and cycle where we're cycling in and cycling out of different things, and it brings about certain things in us, or and so forth. So yes, so when you start adding on responsibilities, so now we talk about situations, and we call those like like houses or like environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, family. Now I got this on here. So it depends on now there's another obligation or another situation.
Right.
And so now how am I responding to that, right?
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, like you said, oh, I had a child and I got
Yes.
these different things. Or so all these things is
Can impact.
it can impact and can shift you. It can shift you into your shadows. Like you know what I'm saying? You could have had it could be too much responsibility, or you
Yes.
like hormonal changes, and
Absolutely.
and you know you got too many kids. You had too many kids. You just needed one, but you know you got two or three.
Or you didn't need any.
You didn't need any. Yeah. So there's
because there is
so-
an evolutional change
yeah.
when we're in a marriage or in a solid relationship
Yeah. So
where you have a rhythm, right, in the beginning without children.
yeah. So you got all like I said, all those things kind of comes into play. But the good thing, beside all that stuff, there's an energetic threshold behind it all that highlights that. So I know because I don't want to get too caught up in
Too deep.
too many opinions about it. It's just like because
Right.
there's an underlying thread that everyone is operating by. There's like an algorithm that everyone is operating by, and you're going to operate inside that range and that scope. So even when certain things are happening that we identify as journey paths in your journey path,
Yes.
is going to have an effect. It depends on how you go through that a particular initiation or challenge,
Right.
and what you're able to pull from that. Are you able to pull from it, or is it going to deflate you or regress you, right? Or is it just adding to you? So, and that depends on everyone. Like Tia has a twin. Not to shift the conversation to the twin, but I'm saying is
Right.
her and her twin can have the exact same numbers. Obviously, they do, but they exude different things because how they went through certain initiations in their life and their things. So it brought about certain characteristics or certain strengths in their character,
Right.
or also weaken certain things. So that's why you see some contrasting things in them both, as you should, because they're their own individual,
Right.
even though they have common numbers. But someone could be more in their shadows, someone could be more in their light, or someone could kind of moment in and out of it. So it just depends. But yeah, just the all those factors. But what we do know energetically, because these numbers are giving us the insight into the energetic piece.
Right.
So energy precedes reality. So people think they're exempt from it, but the end of the day is the energetic combination and energetic sequence that you're aligned in. And if you're not mindful on how to shift it, it can, it's going to dictate what's going to manifest.
Okay.
Right. So we're showing that right there, and you're showing the numbers.
Absolutely.
These things are manifesting, and then what it is. And so it's like, how do you navigate through that?
Right.
So if you lack this aspect of awareness of self, then you're less likely to have this strength inside yourself to help navigate through these different things that come at you.
I definitely can see that.
Yeah. So they both have, so it's interesting, they both have this additional imbalance or conflicting or extreme pull on their emotional lineup. So I found that very interesting on top of the whole communication. So if they're not aware of this, right? Because now all of a sudden, we all say the time, I'm feeling some kind of way. Well, looking at their number, remember they got more push than pull.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you have this emotional, and it shows in numbers that you're liable between y'all to have more frequent conflicting emotions just based off your numbers.
And then in those conflicting emotional changes, you can also have just little bouts of argumentative spaces that you're having with each other. So you're getting a lot of irritations.
It's frequent. It's frequent. Yeah.
It's almost like pettiness.
Yep.
Is that what we're seeing more? You can get more to a petty state, or just misunderstandings, and then just
a lot of that. Yeah.
Conflicts. And spats and stuff like that, to where it's not something we would call of a norm rhythm in a relationship. But if you're seeing those peaks and valleys on a constant from a pettiness view, you can kind of see where.
Yeah, I like to call them conflict clusters.
Okay, so the conflict clusters that's happening
is more frequent.
Are more
with
frequent
them.
than the average. Okay.
Yeah, they're facing more conflict clusters.
Okay.
Than somebody else per se. And so it's like, how are y'all going to navigate? And we know they have a -8 resilience score, so they don't have that much resilience
to
really work through these emotional challenges. So they're liable to have more emotional exhaustion. So they probably, when those conflict clusters kick in,
Right.
and it depends on, and they have them more frequent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because again, you got more push. You got 54% pushing, only 46% being pulled in.
Right.
So you got these clusters, whether it's justified or not, but what we can point to that leads to some emotional exhaustion. So,
okay.
So they probably, and again, I said communication is an issue.
Right.
And when you go a little deeper into their profile, you start looking at their elements. Right. They don't have a lot of air.
Okay, so before you start talking about the elements.
What am I going to do? I'll just mention.
No, but I want them to hear this because it's important. There are elements that we also have in the living soul system that we use. So explain what the different elements are.
Yeah, so there's 5 different elements that helps give us insight into shaping of our persona.
Okay.
And so you got the water, air, fire, earth, wood, and metal, and they all signify certain traits or behavioral traits that begins to operate in the composite of who we are.
Okay.
And so we kind of can point these things and kind of see as indicators, like also what's the cycles and trends that will come from you based off of the elements operating from you that's assigned to you.
Okay. And you said that Corey has what element did you say? Or was it Tia that lacked which element did you?
Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them scores very low in air.
Air. Now the air element, what is that signifying?
Idea generation, creativity, communication. So they probably together don't generate a lot of creative ideas together. Now, it doesn't mean that for them, I think it's more in the communication part, because they have good amount of earthwood. And so creativity can kind of come from there, but it's more practical, more grounding.
Okay.
So probably initial in the early part of the relationship, because the 2 is also very grounding.
Right.
So there's probably a sense of grounding that they provided for each other.
Yeah.
That brought them together,
Which is called what caused the pull.
It caused the pull, right? And so in that, the patience and things like that.
Yes.
So they do have a good presence of earthwood in there. But when we shift over but it's like you don't really give air to the creativity if you have it. Okay. So
and air is breathing life, right?
Yeah. So
because when we're breathing in.
Yeah.
So air is going to breathe
that life. Now they got some fire, so it can fuel it.
So that can help with the passion, right?
Yeah, the passion. But it's like breathing air. Do they speak life into each other's creativity? And so just look at the numbers based off the alignments and get to the element piece. There's not a lot of that going on. So especially when you talk about women, right? If you're not breathing life, really, it's same for for men. So they're both, and they probably never thought about it. It's probably a blind spot. So he has
right. Well,
so
if I was sitting in the coaching session, so for
them,
they're coming into the session,
this
we're wanting to get married. It's
well, wait, this is something
we need to look at.
This is something right here that I'm quite sure, and it's definitely probably a blind spot because we look at it numerically. It's that, and then you're probably not even mindful of the importance of it because both of you don't have a natural default to do that. So you won't sit here and be like, hey, just breathing life into your ideas and thing, or just into you as an individual in terms of what you need. And so that's lacking, And
so when there's a lack, what happens?
Got to fill it with something.
Fill it with something.
Right.
So a lot of times that means you're going
to the shadow part.
Right.
Right. So there's probably some shadow that kicks in now. When we talk about the elements, TA has a lot of metal.
And so now what does the metal signify in the elements?
Discipline, boundaries, precise, being detailed.
To precision.
Yeah, all that. And so Corey has a good amount of metal as well. So that's good for them. So there's a structure part, and then also with their 2, but we also see she can get pulled out of that. Now here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
Even looking at So looking at the archetype energetics,
Right.
we talk about the 7 and 2 creating imbalance, but then when you shift to the metal in those,
Mm-hmm.
she has a lot of a metal in there, which kicks it over to the extreme, which then pulls in
That's cool.
a shadow.
Okay.
So superficiality, we see
Okay.
her being superficial,
Right. Superficial. Yeah.
judgmental.
Yes.
Okay, so I think, and then being anal, right? So
So being anal meaning it's just you.
just like you said, petty
Oh.
body, all that shit. You know,
Right.
it's probably comes in, and that's
Right.
that's the shadow, and then over complicating things,
Okay. And I can see
overthinking.
that.
Yeah. So some of these shadows starts to kick in. It's liable. It's a high likelihood
Mm-hmm.
that from the metal it converts with that. So breaking, just past the restraints, right?
Right.
Um, and that's there. So that shows. And so so you got that kind of going on. So there's a chance that Tia probably can break rank. Well,
Mm-hmm.
looking at her numbers and looking at her actions and looking at what we're seeing,
Right.
I'm like, well, the numbers are showing it because
Right.
we see, like I said, mentioned the 7 to, the 7's conflicting with her 2's.
Right.
And then we start looking at the elements, start looking at, that exchange where that can pull into the shadows. And so that gives us a high insight to see just inside her
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. Now, Corey's big deficiency is that air. So you can look at Corey. I don't think he's someone who probably just does and don't um, really continue to just kind of communicate. It's not like he can't communicate.
Right.
It's just understand the importance to maybe breathe life into things. So he
Right.
might try to show it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
He has his earth, he has his fire,
Okay.
right? And so
he's passionate then. So
he's
got
passionate.
that.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he's very passionate and he's very
And so what?
grounding.
I don't think
So
we really talk too much about with the fire element. So what's the fire element?
that passion,
traits?
that charm, that motivation, just that,
Yeah.
that, and they both got it,
Okay.
So it makes sense.
Which
They're
it makes
actors,
sense because they both have
the
that
industry that they're in. You got to have some fire,
Absolutely. Well, you got to be able to come into character,
man. Yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and come from, for him to do his last movie role, he had to come from an abusive male.
Yes,
masculine,
and tap into that
now, version of self.
And that's interesting you mentioned that, and that reflects his 9.
Okay.
Because the 9 is able to impersonate.
Oh, absolutely.
And so see Corey, people are like, well, how do you look really did that? Well, he has the ability to impersonate. That's showing the 9.
And that's also showing his gift in his
Yes.
actual living soul as being the 9 being his impersonation, which actually helped to finance or become his backing for his,
it's part of his purpose.
Financial purpose. Yes.
When you see and that's his sun alignment. So anything in the sun alignment and the psychic alignment gives us good clues into your purpose. So he's operating in his sense of purpose.
Yes.
And when you listen to him talk, whenever you can see he really takes it not lightly. I mean, he's very articulate. So when I say communication, we're not talking about that he can't talk and can't articulate himself.
Right.
I think it's more the aspect of breathing life. So he hasn't tapped into using his communication to breathe life into his relationships or breathe life into things.
Yes.
And so, especially in their dynamic,
right,
that's highly important when they come together, but they both lack it. So when you listen to her talk, you're like, oh, I know you're not breathing life into him,
right,
and he's not bringing life into you.
Right.
And so I think that's their biggest nemesis
and deficiency in the
in the relationship that probably wasn't. So if they would have came early on saying we're sitting down, that was definitely something would have brought in, is like, y'all gonna have to develop a practice with y'all that you'll understand with each other to make sure you're breathing life, and you got to work at it because it's a deficiency. So it's not something they're naturally going to default to in their own instinct.
And what's so powerful about what you're saying, and I'm using this, or I should say we're using this as an example for people to understand that this living soul reading that we're doing right here can be done for you and your own personal relationships also. So if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to contact us via, you can call 844-594-7366 or 844-5-WISDOM to help you remember. We do these readings to help you personally learn some very in-depth, dynamic information about you one-on-one or you in a relationship. However you want to learn about the living soul, you can get this reading also. Just wanted to make sure you understand that.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I wanted to also reiterate about Corey and Tia's relationship. The power of us understanding how their dynamic really is unique, because they have these elements that are unique to their relationship, but they're not that abnormal. This is a relationship that may be very similar to yours. So we're trying to help you to see some of the different things in the elements, some of the things in the numbers, some of the things in the earth, the moon. We are helping you to see how we're able to distinguish certain things from this reading and living soul understanding.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the things you see with the number that shows highly there's an inconsistent flow. So that's one of the things you definitely are pulling, from this, is that they have it. There's a high likelihood to have inconsistent flow because you got more frequent waves of challenges. It could just be emotional. It could be a knack. It could be, but you got these clusters, of conflict that just comes up. And so how y'all respond to it, and they don't have enough ammunition to pull from each other to deal with it. So after a while, it begins to wan your fervor down. Okay. And so their emotional battery, their sexual battery, all these other batteries that you need in your relationship begins to go down.
Right.
And so it's just showing, like, look, if you're trying to have a long, sustaining relationship, it looks very challenging if you're not going to really get into the inner work,
right?
The personal reflection, understanding yourself, not just yourself, but understanding each other and learning how to breathe life. That's the biggest thing, is that they don't, and it's on both of them. They don't bring life. Because think about it. If you don't have that, and right, it's not a right or wrong. It's just this element in y'all's dynamic becomes even more amplified and important, because the score, unfortunately, being the way it is connected to the lack of this.
Right.
So it's something that you have to help each other work and to evolve through.
Right.
So that way it can put you over that threshold of being in the negative and being into the positive.
And actually, I think the conscious understanding of the deficiency, doesn't that also help? By us actually knowing this, here's the numbers.
Yeah, the power of understanding.
There's the power of understanding that we have a deficiency here in understanding, and also in, we lack in certain areas. So now we can be more conscious.
You're conscious and mindful, or proactive.
Right.
And so with that, when I talk about the inconsistent flow, they also don't score too well in the water. So the water also.
So what's the water element?
Everybody quickly knows water is dealing with intuition and emotions.
Okay.
But also it highlights the adaptability. So them as in a relationship together, they lack adaptability. So think about it. I don't breathe life.
Right.
I got all this extra metal that makes me break rank, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or I could be too rigid. Mm-hmm. So you look at that as like lack of flexibility. Because metal, right? So if it's too much, you lack flexibility. It's hard, it's rigid, it don't want to move. Yeah. It don't want to break. So then there's this adaptability that they have together that's not it's not at a sustainable level to help you navigate through. But again, this is why it shows up in that gravity score that, in terms of because if you want a long, sustaining, healthy relationship and during relationship,
Yes.
you have to have an aspect and a good dosage of adaptability.
Okay.
And they don't have it. They don't. They it scores low. So I don't breathe life.
Well, now how could you improve if you notice that a couple is in this scenario as Corey and Tia? They have a low adaptability. How can you improve adaptability in a love affair?
Well, that's where the communication will come to play, and
they don't do too well.
They don't do too well there,
right? So.
So they're going to have to find out they can tap into their earth.
Okay.
Right.
So what's the earth?
Because the earth gives you.
What's the earth element again?
The earth is giving us stability.
Okay.
That practicality. So they both, according to the number, they both have a good presence of that. So they're going to have to draw a lot from their earth. I'm not saying their main attractor was the patience,
yes,
but because there's a lot going on with their twos.
Yes.
Even though they two
individually
and together. And together.
Yes.
So the twos is an attractor point for them, but also the two is just under attack from other different things at the exact same time. So it's
not holding strong.
It's not holding strong. So they can take advantage of their earth and channel things from there, right? Okay. And also even the metal, they got good presence of metal. It's just that Tia shows that she can kind of go into the shadow in the metal,
right.
But they both have that metal presence. So they have to really sit down and get practical and almost like lay out, this is what we're going to do. So if we're in a situation, what's my contingency plan? So they're like, have to get more strategic planning. Knowing that we have these deficiencies. So if we get, for example, one thing, in a relationship is like, right. So this might be a protocol to put in place. If I'm upset with you, we're not going to bed upset. Right.
Okay, so that's like sometimes that's a mantra or
it could be a mantra, but it's a protocol you're putting in place.
Right.
Right.
Like a code of conduct.
A code of conduct because it helps you become adaptable. Yes. What is that doing in helping adaptability? Well, if I got an issue with you, we're not going to let this thing fester.
Right.
We're going to sit there and process that stuff through so that way we continue to go to bed to peace. So over the long haul, you build in a practice that is less likely to shade what y'all have. Because that's a weakness, but you don't have to let it become a weakness. But you might have to institute because they are metal.
That's a powerful thing for it.
Because they are because they are practical with the earth and they all got a good presence of metal. So let's use those as strong points.
Yes.
And put, so it's not someone else, I don't want all that rigidity. That might not be your makeup. But for them,
right, that is.
Right. And that's what can keep them, give you some train tracks to stay right here because you have these other factors right here. So we're not going to do that, right? We're not going to sit here and go bad, on a bad note. And then you might institute another thing. So maybe like every day after you put the kids to bed, that we might can talk, and then we might set every 2 weeks on a certain day to kind of talk about some disappointments or concerns it's facing. So they have to plan the actions that will lead to a future attributes that they both share in their relationship. Right. And that becomes a thing that helps safeguard them from themselves.
And I think that's very powerful. What you're sharing is that's also helping to develop where your weakness is.
Cultivate that.
To help that to cultivate and to bring in the strength in the you and he.
Right.
And then afterwards, when you start to building practice, it actually helps to
becomes
not only that, it becomes a culture, but also it becomes something to stand on, something to have as a backup.
Right.
We have this, even though we know we're a little insufficient here. It doesn't mean we have to leave each other or break up.
No. It's an opportunity for growth.
Right.
At the end, that's what it is. It's an opportunity for growth, but it just requires for them. They got to take a lot more actions, in there. So they got to work hard through it because that's not their natural default. But yet they do have these traits as strengths, but they might not be applying it to safeguard themselves from themselves. So from a coaching aspect, this is where we pull those things and bring it to light.
Absolutely.
And that way it's not, and it's a likelihood that they more will go with it because it's part of them anyways.
Right.
We're just showing them how to apply it. Since you already operate this way anyways, or already show tendencies this way,
Right.
let's go ahead and use this to create this.
Yeah.
So that way y'all both can somewhat, and you can remind each other and hold each other accountable, and then you make a commitment for that. I won't get offended when you hold me accountable into this certain action, because there's also that level of pettiness and shit there. So they have to be true with themselves,
Right.
and then someone kind of can almost write this relationship constitution
Oh, I love that.
of what they're going to do.
Yes.
Because in their scenario, they kind of favor that, but you definitely know it's probably not in there. You know, right. So
now
obviously,
that it's over,
there might be certain, certain things. But again, they had the two of the tractor. They like routine. You need routine.
Right.
But there might be conflicts around it. But y'all need routine. Y'all definitely need routine.
Yes.
They're not a couple that could just flow, be fluid. They need some level of
proactivity.
Of guardrails, some boundaries and structure. Yeah. I mean, it's all structure, in it, but they really have to have these certain parameters just in their makeup as a couple. And obviously that really wasn't really put into play, because like I said, they both have a very good presence of metal.
Right.
Things like that. So it's almost, that technicality that they both have being, very calculated. So it's almost, they kind of got to put those things in place to safeguard themselves, in their relationship they got going on. And that's going to help them to have a relationship flow.
Okay.
Well,
I love that.
Yeah.
So I would say in closing, because
go on.
It really did shed some light on some things I think that we did not know. I mean, with why things kind of went into, unfortunately, into the situation where they didn't have, they didn't stand the test of time. They stood a long time because they were together, I think, over 10 years. But unfortunately, they didn't, go the long haul.
They carried out the numbers.
Yes. And again, a lot of times we never sit down and think about, well, what can we learn from the Tia and the Corey numbers and how they were made up. And one of the things that I think I got from it is that in relationships, we can be a lot more proactive in learning our needs and wants in the relationships and learning our blind spots. When you go into a long-term relationship, marriage, or whatever you're doing, when you go into a long-term relationship like this, it's vitally important that you know more than not what's going on with your numbers. And our numbers really are significant.
Yeah, they reveal a lot. Well, first of all, it's showing the energetics. So energy precedes reality. So the more we kind of get a pulse, it's like the weather. We kind of we rely on the principles, to help us forecast the weather. And it's in a significantly high percent of accuracy, the weather. So we kind of can prepare. So at least I can look at the forecast, like it might snow, the temperature might going to drop. I can clothe myself and prepare.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what's going on with relationship. That's why you need to understand your numbers, because it helps you prepare. Understand your numbers for yourself. To understand your numbers in your relationship, because there's different seasons inside the relationship,
right?
And so it might be winter inside that house.
Very cold.
It'll be very cold. And it might be summer. It might be spring in your house. So do you know when that season's coming?
Right.
Are
you prepared?
Well? Do you know the signs when winter's coming in your house?
Right.
And so you just want to tap into these, these numbers, and they show a lot about yourself, a lot about what's going on, a lot of, just there's a gamut of things not to get into that, but
yeah,
they highlight a lot, and I've seen how it's benefiting many relationships. It's reconciling a lot of people in relationships, giving people clarity. There's a lot of people I'm dealing with that actually been through divorces, but they are changing their attitude So maybe the bitterness or resentment that they had uh,
Breakup.
from their breakup,
Hmm.
they're actually understanding
How did we get there?
how we got there, but also understanding their point of view. Like, oh, they probably felt like boom, 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 or they probably was processing this way, boom, 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 based off of their lineup
Right.
and their numbers. So you get a lot of that. So basically, that points to closure. Some people need some sense of closure
Definitely.
in a
A lot of people
relationship,
do. I
and the
know I
numbers,
did.
yeah, and the numbers help get you that closure to understand. And like I said, when we're reflecting, it just equips us to be able to really become better ourselves and be able to navigate relations better, because relations is a result of mirroring.
Right.
And people just they run from that, and it's like you can't run from it.
No.
So the numbers help you to see that mirroring, to see the the
Well,
things
it
that's
really
being moved.
helps with self-reflection, because if we think about it, when we see the numbers,
It instantly makes you
it
do that.
instantly
Yeah.
helps us to identify, even in ourselves. Ooh, I do realize that I do have these traits. Or,
Yeah.
ooh, now that you're mentioning this, now I understand why I've had these certain,
Yeah. These disruptions.
inner disruptions
Yeah.
inside that I never really talked about, but because now it's exposed in my numbers, I see now.
You see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes the other person you're with can help you cultivate to bring up that level of
And
growth
elevate some
and
things.
elevate you some
Mhm.
things. And
Yeah.
so, cause we need each other, and
Absolutely.
so, but yeah, we'll see those things, and it's kind of funny to see people like, ooh, like you said, like,
Oh yeah, definitely.
but you start to see like, oh,
This is how we got here.
this can get interpreted this way with this
Absolutely.
person number,
Yes.
but it might be interpreted this way with them.
Right.
And so you start to see like, oh, because we get caught up sometimes thinking everything is cookie cutter,
Yeah.
and it's not. There's a variety. There's many different love styles and many different um, thinking characteristics and combinations that we come from
Mm-hmm.
within ourselves, and when it's mixed in. So there's a lot that we have to just catch on the fly about us, and these numbers helps make it clear. So it takes the unseen, and it starts to give you, it starts to fashion and give you some
Point of references.
point of references
Yeah.
to see like, oh, I see that, I recognize that, okay, I get it, and so it just helps you.
Absolutely.
So like I said, but we all have blind spots, so one of the biggest things that helps you see those blind spots.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, I don't know if you want to look over some of the comments. I didn't have a chance to go through them, but
It's so small.
we have
You know.
hard time seeing. But
Not trying to do
anyway,
that.
but anyway, I appreciate everybody that came on. Please be sure to share this video, subscribe to my channel. I never know when I'm going to do another reading. I know I have been doing the I Would Coach episodes, so I am talking about different celebs and what they got going on. And in those, I will be doing some Living Soul readings again. And let's go into deep diving on some of why are their relationships looking like this, or why are we derailing, or how do we get here? How can we get from here to here? And we can start to navigate and try to create some beautiful ways to which we can restore and create a better relationship. Sometimes it takes a while to do that. But it's not easy. We just have to sometimes get into a better balance, challenge ourselves without getting so caught up in everything that's going on. So, like I said, coaching matters. Always remember that. I appreciate everyone that came on tonight. Again, make sure to share this video. It's your coach, Carla Nicole, Satori Seals. We're out tonight. Have a great day. Have a great night, guys. Best kept.